We want to welcome everyone and certainly want to thank everyone for taking the opportunity to view this keener training session, the Transportation Management System Overview. Schlumberger has invested heavily on a transportation management system here in North America, and we want to take that time to share this information with you as well as a logistics carrier. Within this training agenda, some of the things that we will be covering are the following. We'll give you some background information as far as the project itself. We will introduce this project to yourself. We're also going to be discussing the current business process that has existed in Schlumberger as early as 2007 with Excel and CAS. We're also going to be sharing information related to some of the fundamental changes that will happen as a result of this project. Part of those changes also translate to key benefits for all of the logistics carriers who will be participating in this new project, this new initiative on behalf of Schlumberger. As part of this change, we're also going to be communicating through this presentation some next steps that are needed on the carrier side, as long as the support structure that will be in place to support you as we go on through this new initiative and exciting time here in Schlumberger. Schlumberger has recently introduced a transportation management system, which is what we call the TMS here in North America. When we take a look at the current landscape and the urgent need of why we need a new business system, is because we find that there's little collaboration between Schlumberger and its logistics carriers from the aspect of a business system. Therefore, part of this initiative is to provide improvements all along the line for logistics operations. The single source system, or the TMS, will enable better communication between Schlumberger and its logistics carriers from the aspect of managing tenders, shipment tracking and tracing, and also the ability to have a single source system for electronic invoicing. This will allow both Schlumberger and the logistics carrier under one system, which we are now calling the TMS, to have visibility on both sides of the fence. What this will eventually result in is better collaboration, better communication between the logistics carriers and Schlumberger's distribution organization overall. Let's take a look at some of the business processes from a current state and also from a future state. Since 2007 and early 2008, for the current state, this is how Schlumberger North America has been using Excel and CAS as business partners to help plan, execute, and invoice transportation. If we look, both of these organizations, along with Schlumberger and the carrier, have played fundamental roles in the business process. Schlumberger will continue to manage its transportation requests, planning and tender shipments. It's the carrier's responsibility, and always has been, to execute on that shipment. Beyond that, once the shipment has been executed, the carrier would always mail an invoice to CAS, which will then Excel and CAS would further validate that invoice, and once that validation is complete, send back to Schlumberger on an approval process for that payment to ultimately be released to the logistics carrier. The future state of this business process looks a bit different than what you're currently used to for the last couple of years. If we look at the future state, you already notice that there's two organizations that are no longer with us. As part of this transformation or this new project initiative, the TMS will allow for better communication and better collaboration between both companies, as the carriers will have their own system, their own view of all the tenders, all the shipments, and all the invoices that you will be managing on behalf of Schlumberger. Schlumberger will continue to manage the transport request. This is activity that's certainly initiated by Schlumberger. Schlumberger would further consider the planning and tendering to a particular logistics carrier, but the logistics carrier will then, on their carrier portal, will have visibility to all the shipments that are being tendered to the carrier. In a future training, a scenario or series, you will also expect to see the different type of training specific to tendering management, shipment execution, and invoice management. From a process perspective, let's focus on the project from the process just for now. Carriers will have the opportunity via a carrier portal to accept or reject tenders that are being provided to that carrier. Once that tender has been accepted, it is now the responsibility to the carrier to show to Schlumberger that they will be executing on that shipment. From a system perspective, this is what that actually means. What that means is that we will be managing 4 fundamental gating events, 2 related to its origin and 2 related to its destination. We can capture date and times both from the origin perspective and from the destination perspective. For the Canadian carriers, we will provide a separate video specific to the gating events that would be needed for the Canada carriers. For all practical purposes, this video is primarily for the U.S. carriers on this particular event or this particular topic of shipment execution. We can provide a date and timestamp at origin when the truck has actually arrived. We can provide a date and timestamp when the truck has actually departed its origin. We can also provide a date and timestamp when the vehicle or the truck has actually arrived to its destination location. And finally, a date and timestamp when that truck has actually completed its route to that destination location. For all practical purposes, these date and timestamps would be used in our TMS to calculate additional accessorial such as detention or demurrage for that invoice. If your contract allows for detention calculation, it will be considered within the TMS for visibility. With these gating events, as these gating events are being submitted, we will note that there is a track and trace within the TMS that will provide visibility to our distribution organization on the actual status of that shipment. Once these gating events are submitted, the TMS will create an electronic invoice that will be made available to the carriers within 24 hours of that last gating event. Once the invoice is prepared, the carrier will have visibility on the carrier portal and the opportunity to make amendments or changes to their invoice, that electronic invoice created by the TMS, to be able to submit that to Schlumberger. Once Schlumberger has received that invoice, we can automatically further approve the invoice and process that invoice into our ERP, which is SAP. Overall, you will notice that all of this process will be now systemic, and the carrier and Schlumberger via the carrier portal can communicate information back and forth electronically. So as to highlight some of the key TMS tasks for the carriers, as form of a summary, here are some of the responsibilities on behalf of the carrier. Responding electronically to tenders. Providing the tracking events that the TMS calls for. Please note that this is certainly a key event, as this will start the invoicing process in the TMS and provide the opportunity for you within 24 hours to review your invoice and consequently submit that to Schlumberger. You also notice that within that electronic invoice, you have the opportunity to make updates or changes to your invoice to include additional accessorial if that particular shipment accounts for it, or if they even need it at that point. You will be able to submit your invoices to Schlumberger electronically. Some of the key benefits that we want to review as far as this application is concerned, or this TMS initiative. Moving forward, for every transaction that's created within the TMS, there will be no need, absolutely no need for printing, handwriting, or mailing invoices to Schlumberger. This will be completely 100% electronic through the carrier portal. With this initiative, as far as invoices are concerned, there will be no need to further contact Excel and CAS, as that invoicing process and communication will be directly between the logistics carrier and Schlumberger. As it relates to payment terms, we expect to pay all carriers in a much more timely fashion than historically we have done. Although we have always honored our payment terms, because this process is now 100% electronic, we will have full visibility to the invoices being created, its approval process, and will be sent to our ERP consequently. Among some of the other features of the carrier portal, the carrier will have the ability to access information for every shipment being processed and being performed into the TMS, and will also have the opportunity to load documents in the carrier portal, as some documents are needed for proof of evidence or simply as proof for that shipment. Among our training scenarios, there's a series of videos that will be created and will be made available to you that simply provide in more detail the systemic approach and demonstration of each action to take. You'll notice that we have standard workflows, which are being highlighted here, of tender acceptance, shipment execution, which simply means providing the gating events both at origin and destination, and also the invoice submission. We will always have information related to videos related to how do I reject a tender? How do I recall an invoice if I need to make an update? How are credit notes being managed? And what about debit notes? These type of topics will also be considered in our series of videos for training for the carrier. Let's talk about next steps and support. For next steps as the carrier, we are providing carrier training similar to this one via webinar trainings. As we deploy the TMS throughout North America, all the carriers are being targeted to be invited to a webinar training. We will supplement the webinar trainings with a similar fashion of the videos that you are listening to just now. As far as support structure, we have heavily invested in this, and we have named Barry Morgan as our product champion of the TMS in North America, and Barry will play a fundamental role throughout the deployment of this project. We are also assigning geographically or by region a local champion, and we will be providing this information specific to you during our webinar trainings. We have a project team that's dedicated to this TMS NAM project, both from building the solution to also deploying the solution, and they also will be made available to you. Our point of contact will be Barry Morgan and the local champion when that time arrives. We certainly want to thank each and every one of you for taking the opportunity to reviewing this TMS overview. We hope that this information has been helpful as we deploy the TMS here in North America, and look forward and encourage you to look at our different line of videos related to specifically different topics or actions that the carrier can take into the carrier portal.